I am Dan McCutcheon.
So Dan, it's really good to be able to just talk to you, and I'm excited just to sit down and talk to you. I know a little bit about your story, but want to start off by just as always, just talking about what it was like for you before you became a Christian, before you really accepted Christ as your Savior.
Well, I was brought up in church my whole life. Obviously, I was brought up Roman Catholic.
Uh-huh.
We went to church, we went to Mass every Sunday, went to catechism.
So that was pretty regular in your
Oh,
life.
yeah,
So
very
you guys
regular.
were very dedicated.
Oh, yeah, very dedicated. Every Sunday, went to catechism, went through the whole confirmation, communion, First Holy Communion, baptism as a baby.
Uh-huh.
So, but, I started to notice when I moved south that as I grew a little older in my mid-20s that the Catholic faith was, I needed a little more. I needed a little more, and I was kind of looking. And plus, it doesn't hurt when you go down south. Only 2% of the population is Roman Catholic, so you don't have a lot of options. Yeah. Everybody's Baptist. so I went. I started attending different churches, actually, from all the way from Baptist to went to the Catholic Church for a while, and then I went all the way to the holy roller, so to speak. So I kind of got a mixture, and but settled on Southern Baptist, and then.
Well, it strikes me that you mentioned that there was just something missing. It seemed like from, can you describe that a little bit more?
Well, just a little bit. I felt like obviously the priest would talk about the Gospels, but I noticed that you never really went anywhere else into the Bible other than the four Gospels. You just kind of stayed right there. That was your Sunday Mass, and we referred to the Bible, but you didn't really study the Bible. And so it was a little different. And then things started, like the priest forgiving me instead of God, and little things that you just think, well, that's different. That's what I've done my whole life, but it seems like there ought to be a little more.
Yeah.
And as I
and was that an internal thing that you started feeling, or was that like just noticing other people or having conversations with?
Well, a combination.
Okay.
It was internal,
Uh-huh.
definitely internal. But then in the South, again, it wasn't if you went to church; it's when you went to church. And so
The Bible Belt.
Yes, exactly. And it was like, where are you going to church? Where are you going to church? Where are you going to church? And so that's where you went to church. And so
Yeah.
I was kind of pushed a little bit by tradition down in the South, and I was young and impressionable. And then I was also looking for a kind of a change. So it was kind of a good combination. God was working on me, and people were working on me.
Yeah.
And then
Was it, when you say people were working on, was it a combination of coworkers or?
Yeah, a lot of coworkers. I was a school teacher at that point in my career.
Okay.
And so a lot of teachers would, coaches, they'd want me to come to church with them,
Awesome.
go visit with them. And so I was, because also I didn't know anybody down there. I'd taken this job in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and
Wow.
I didn't know anybody. And so, my brother came down.
Okay.
And so he was but it wasn't long, and he was working down on the beach in construction, and so we weren't living together. So it was one of them deals where I was kind of by myself.
Did you guys move down together? Did he move before you?
He moved down with me.
Okay.
He moved down with me, and he got a job on the beach. And one day he had
wow.
a job. He was in
Wow.
construction, and then he brought my cousin down. But then they got a job at the beach. They were building this big, so they went and got an apartment down at the beach instead of driving clear up from Jacksonville.
Uh-huh.
So I was kind of by myself until about a year later, when my future wife at that time would come down, and then she started teaching as well. But for a
Okay.
year there or so, I was pretty well by myself.
So where'd you go to school at? I mean, like at college?
I went to High University here in
Okay.
Athens,
Uh-huh.
and I was a bit of a wanderer. I didn't want to stay here. I was getting out of this little town. I was going to turn the world upside down, and so I was going to live near the beach and tackle the world and all that good stuff. And so I took a job in North Carolina. What I did is I rode ahead, and I told these counties. I said, I'm coming down this week in July, and I'd like to interview. And so I'll be in your town on such and such day. So I started in like Greensboro, North Carolina, and then I went to Burlington, and I went to Wilmington, North Carolina, and Jacksonville, and New Bern, a few towns down in there along the coast. And the day I got back to Ohio, my dad said, hey, some principal named Alex Boyle called you, and he wants to interview you. He wants you there Monday. I'm like, well, this was like Saturday, So, so anyway, but I had another interview that day in a little town in Virginia. So I drove over for that town. That was a funny story. That's the only time I've ever. They say if you drive really late and you don't get enough sleep, you'll start seeing like funny creatures go across the road, like purple dragons and everything. and that's true because I drove that day like 6 hours. It was way over in the Eastern Panhandle and out in that part of Virginia.
Yeah.
And then I interviewed, got in the car, drove 6 hours back. So by the time I was getting close to Parkersburg, I was dragging, and I saw these purple dragons crossing the road. I'm like, what the heck? What's going on here? But
that's when you know you need some sleep.
You need a little sleep. You need a little sleep. So then I come in that day and then slept that night, and the next day left for North Carolina because they wanted to interview me right away.
And so how old were you at this time? Or
I
you
was
just graduated?
Yeah, 22, 23 years
Okay.
old. Yeah.
Yeah. And you taught for 13 years?
13 years. Yeah, because I had taught 1 year up here when I graduated from OU as a full-time sub over at Marietta. But I didn't get – that teacher came back from maternity leave, so I didn't get a position. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go down south because, I'd heard they were hiring.
Now, do you have like an expertise in like in math or?
I was physical education.
Oh, physical.
But I had taken 3 classes through the mail at Utah State in special needs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they hired me as a special needs teacher since I was such an expert. And I taught behavior and emotionally handicapped.
Yeah.
Which I was by the end of the year.
Well, I'm sure that was a kind of an experience, but was that rewarding or
It was rewarding. All right. It was tough. It was really tough. That's the first time I really got to know Satan because I had one kid that was actually demon possessed.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, and he was, and it was really, really a difficult situation.
Oh,
but
wow.
Those kids just came from such terrible. I mean, one girl I know, her home was a dirt floor. It was different world.
Yeah.
So it was tough. That was a tough year. And then I decided to go in. It took me a couple years. Well, actually, it took me about 4 or 5 years before I finally got into elementary PE, which is what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you had to go through the battle scars to get the position you wanted.
So going back to like when you were starting to think about your faith and people were starting to encourage you to go to church, what was that? How did that turn from not knowing Christ to having that Catholic background and then really making Jesus really kind of like your Lord and Savior?
Absolutely. In
that way? How did that part unfold?
Well, that's kind of a funny story because when you're by this time, a couple years later, I was married and 2 teachers, and we were both broke because didn't make a lot of money. So one of the teachers approached me about getting in the Amway business, which I'd never even heard of Amway. I'm like, what is this? And so they told me about it, all this stuff. So I got all excited, and I'm like, yeah, this is going to be my own business. So I went out and started building the business and talking to people and sharing, and well, before I knew it, I had hit this achievement where they said, you hit this level, so we're going to have a qualifier. You get to go to Kingston Dominion with us, and you get to be with all these other people that have done what you've done and get to hear these motivational speakers. And I was like, yeah, this is great. So we went up and went to the amusement park, and we were staying the night. And so they said the next morning, if you would like to come back, we're going to have a non-denominational worship service. And I'm like, okay, so let's do that. So my wife and I, we went to the service, and it was just one of the sales guys talking. He wasn't a preacher. But he was talking from the Bible, talking from the Word, and he did an altar call. And I'm like, I'd never heard anything like this before.
Yeah.
You don't hear altar calls in Catholic churches.
Yeah, that's not, you're not used to it. Yeah.
So my wife and I both went forward, and we're like, man, this is fantastic. So we were all excited, and it was April Fool's Day, 1990.
That's one way
God
to
has
remember
a sense
that.
of humor.
Yeah, that's one way to remember that date. Huh?
That's right. It was April 1st, 1990.
Wow.
I got saved. I was about 25, something like that. 24. I can't remember exactly, but anyway, yeah, and that started the journey. So then I really got hungry for finding the right church for us.
Yeah.
And so we bounced around, and we ended up in a Southern Baptist church, and really, I've been Baptist really ever since. But
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It sounds like that kind of opened your world to the Bible as a whole,
It did.
rather than just looking at the Gospels.
Right.
You were able to see the totality of
Yes.
the Scriptures and
Yeah.
and really dive into them more. It sounds like.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, yeah. I was very hungry, and I was watching a lot of the ministers on TV, and just was really hungry for the Lord, and doing a lot of. That's also when I found out about tithing, and I'm like, tithing? I just thought you gave $10 every week.
No matter what you made.
$10 every week. And so it's like Chinese, 10 minutes. That's all right. But anyway, so I thought, tithing. Let's try this. We didn't have a lot of money, but I'll never forget the first time we tithed. And I'm not saying this will happen for everybody, but the first time we tithed, my wife came to me like the next day or the day after and said, "Oh, they made some kind of mistake in my pay, and I'm going to get like an extra $2,000 next week." I'm like, this tithing thing works. So, and I have never quit tithing since then.
Yeah.
Ever, and I do believe that that the God will, as He talks about in Malachi, He will rebuke the devourer and He will protect you.
Yeah.
And He'll bless you. Maybe not financially, but you'll be blessed in many ways.
You can't outgive God.
Can't outgive Him. So
and like you said, I liked how you added that too. That it's not maybe just back that financial way, but God's going to do other things in your life because you're honoring Him. You're putting Him first.
Absolutely.
And really, it's that recognition that what you have, God's the one that's given. He's the giver.
He's the giver.
Yeah.
We're just borrowing it.
Yeah.
And but yeah, but He gave us that money almost like, see, I told you. Mm-hmm. And but yeah, I'm a big believer in the tithing.
Well, and I think that's really cool too because that was a moment where God's just kind of, probably was one of that moment to kind of help you to kind of reinforce because your faith at that point was
young Christian.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you stepped out on a bigger leap of faith at that point.
Right.
Trusting God with that. And then God's like, see,
Right. I'd never given that much money away before.
Yeah.
And but yeah, that was exciting to see Him work like that.
Yeah.
So
let's, I know your story a little bit, so I definitely want to make sure we talk about, one of the major things that happened. But is there any other, valleys that you've been through in your life that made it, God allowed you to go through that was hard, that was difficult, even before you accepted Christ, but even maybe after?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been through lots of valleys. So I can remember being in a financial situation and it was dumb decisions, being young and thinking that you had the money to do things that you didn't do, that you shouldn't have done. And I remember we bought a brand new pickup truck, and I can remember my wife's grandma and grandpa coming down and just kind of looking at that pickup truck and saying, because they knew what we didn't know. And and it wasn't long. We didn't have the finances that we needed to have, and so that was a very, very difficult time in life when when the money wasn't there, and then on top of that there was some challenges with my wife that ended up costing us the marriage, and it just was a very, very low part of my life where I was like, what did I do to deserve this? And
what were some of the feelings that you had
well,
with
you just
that?
Felt very empty. You felt lonely. You felt like, where's God at right now? I need Him, and I can't seem to find Him anywhere. I can remember I got an old junk car, and I come up here, and I was 32 years old, something like that, and I brought the car clear up here to see my mom and dad, and I went to the car broke down. So I went to go get in a car, and they wouldn't give. I didn't have credit to get a car, and I was so embarrassed and so mad. I'm like, here I am, 32 years old, and I don't have enough credit to get a car, to rent a car. And so my mom and dad, helped me out, and I paid every penny back. But that was low. That's when you're thinking you're supposed to be successful and take the world by the tail.
Yeah.
And the world's got you by the tail.
And I'm sure being I kind of felt that way too in my 30s. When things weren't quite working out for the way that I wanted them to. That you do take it. It's like, oh. Yeah. This is not what I saw.
Right.
It kind of talking about that young person, you kind of think of how things are going to turn out. And then,
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And then it just, cost my marriage was over, and I was down there at a point where I didn't want to teach school anymore. I was wanting to do something different. And this was maybe a year or two later after the divorce and everything. My family come down to the beach. We'd come every year. I'd find us a beach house, and we'd all pour our money together and rent a house on the beach there at Topsail Island. And so I had rented, I was renting this house, I was renting, a house about as big as Adam's office here. This was the whole house. And so I was...
really cozy.
Oh, yeah, I was cozy. And so I was going... The lady that owned the house was an elderly lady, and she had a big house beside me, and she had a beach house. So she rented us the beach house. Oh, and she told me, she said, and the family was all leaving on Saturday, she said, Dan, I'm not renting that again till Tuesday. Why don't you just stay down there for 2 or 3 days by yourself and, enjoy it. Yeah. No charge.
Oh, wow.
So I was down there by myself at the beach and walking on the beach, and God was speaking to me, and he was just telling me, it's time to go back to Ohio.
Yeah.
So I, packed up. When you got a house, as big as a Cracker Jack, you don't need to pack too much. So I packed up what I had, and come on up, and moved in with my brother, and because again I was broke, so I was trying to find a job, and that's when I got into sales and started selling. I worked for Sears and
you?
Yeah, okay, worked for Sears for a while over here, and I sold worked for Rose Chemical Company and sold greases and benches, and this sales thing was kind of my calling. I was like, I just have to talk and I get paid, and I know how to talk, and so.
Well, and I think that one of the things that I think that you're good at too is you don't you have a confidence to be able to talk to people. Like you don't let fear stop you, and I think that's one of the things I respect about you is that you one, you're humble, and two, you don't let fear keep you from engaging with people and talking to people. And I think for a lot of people that sometimes keeps them from really having conversations.
It does. And I learned that again. I hate to I'm not selling Amway because they taught me to read a bunch of books and listen to tapes. And these books were like, I never read nothing like this before. And it was like Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Oh, yeah. You look at people and you smile. Yeah. And they can't do this if you're doing this. And you get them to say yes 6 or 7 times. And you don't do it in a way that is robotic, because you can tell when you got a robotic salesman, it's no fun.
Yeah.
But you gotta get good at it where, you're just having a conversation and you learn to look at people in the eye, because people don't want you looking down when they're, so look at people in the eye, you shake, give a firm handshake, and you learn things that I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You don't learn that in school. They don't teach you a lot of that stuff. So,
it's funny because you think the books that you should be learning sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Some of that information would be at least passed down.
Exactly. But it's not. So you read books like The Magic of Thinking Big, and all those books, as you read them, are all Christian based.
Yeah.
Every one of them. If you plant over here, you will reap over here.
Yeah.
But if you plant crap, you're going to get crap.
Yeah.
But if you plant good stuff, you'll get good stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's what a lot of people don't learn or don't realize, that sometimes you're not going to get a sale over here, but you still have to make the effort and go through and do the process, because it's going to come up over there.
Yeah.
And you don't know that. But yeah, that's where I learned a lot of that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the one that that we definitely want to make sure we share and talk about. And I was just thinking about, I don't know the age you were at this time when you had this.
Well, that was about the same time I was going through all this mess
Oh, really?
with the financial mess, and so I was about 31 years old, something
Wow.
like that. And
So it probably felt like, man, can it get any worse?
I know that was really a low time in my life. Everything that could go wrong was going wrong, and so I went to the doctor because things weren't operating right in the bedroom. And so I was like, what's going on here? I'm only 31 years old.
Yeah.
So I went to a urologist, and the urologist, he said, your testosterone is like way, way low. He said, you should be way up at 31 years old. So he said, we want to do some tests. So anyway, they did some tests, and I'll never forget. I was teaching class. I was teaching PE, and I had a class, and they said, McCutcheon, you got a phone call. So I went back and got the phone call. Now, this is Dr. So-and-so. Yeah? Well, we got your test back. Looks like you got a tumor in your head.
They said that.
And that's about how he said it. Yep.
They said that over the phone.
You got a tumor in your head about the size of a walnut. And I said, is this serious? He said, yeah, we need to get you in here. You're going to need to get this taken care of.
Wow.
So, okay, went back and taught class. So that was Mr. Professional there. If you're a doctor, don't do it that way. But anyway.
Yeah, was that like in the morning or afternoon? When
Yeah,
did you get that call?
It was like noon or something. I don't know what it
Wow.
was.
So you still had to face the rest of your day.
Right,
and
right.
Who did you talk to about that after? I mean, who did you share that with?
Well, I'm sure I'd share it with my wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, you were still married
Still
at this
married
point.
at that time, yeah.
So the divorce happened maybe 32 or later on?
About that. About
Okay.
a year or two later. 2
Okay.
years later. So anyway, I ended up going to the urologist and looking at everything. And so then I went to my family doctor. And I'm like, what's going to happen? He said, well, they got to take this tumor out. And the problem was the tumor was wrapped up in my optic nerve. It was all right behind it was a prolactin tumor. Non-cancerous, but pretty serious because, it's in your optic nerve. They couldn't believe why I wasn't going blind or wasn't having vision problems. And so anyway, but it threw all my hormones off and everything. So I said, well, who's good at taking these things out? Because this looks like a tricky one. And they said, well, there's 3 doctors. There's one in Atlanta, there's one at Duke, and there was one in, I can't remember the other city. Well, it didn't take long to calculate because the insurance would only cover the one at Duke because I was in North Carolina. So I'm like, I'm going to Duke. So went up there, and the guy said, well, I've done a lot of these surgeries, and yours is difficult because it's all wrapped up in the optic nerve. And so we're only going to get about 50% of it probably because we can't do it by laser. We'll damage your optic nerves. Yeah. So we have to go in and pull it out piece by piece. So so it was the day after Thanksgiving, and is when my surgery was. I remember that. And went into Duke, and you're up on this ward where all these people are dying, and they don't give you a big encouragement because all these people are in serious problems. So we did the surgery, and I was supposed to be in the surgery about 2.5 hours because they had to have an hour and a half to go. They went behind my nose, so they took my nose and cut it and kind of pushed it off, and then went through my head to get to the optic nerve. And then it said it would take about an hour or so to get the tumor, as much as they could get out. So, but anyway, they come out of surgery in an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And my minister was up there, some friends, my mom, a lot of my brothers come up or come down, and that doctor was shaking his head. Of course, I didn't know this. They told me. They said, I ain't never seen nothing like this in my life. He said, I've done over 200 of these surgeries, and he said we went in there. The ear, nose, and throat doctor took an hour and a half to get in there. And he said when we got in there, I went in then to start pulling the tumor out, and he said it literally rolled out of your head like a dead, shriveled up raisin, like something had killed it. And he said I picked it up, looked around for 20 minutes. I couldn't find no other sign of the tumor. We sewed you back up, and I've never had a problem.
That's awesome.
And it was amazing. And I can remember when the miracle happened because we were in Myrtle Beach. Again, Amway, I had qualified for this thing at Myrtle Beach. And so some of these people, after we had our meetings, I was feeling pretty miserable. This was the week prior to the surgery. And one of my buddies down there said, hey, somebody would like to pray with you. Is that okay? And I said, that's absolutely. So after the meetings were over, we went back in a room, and there was about 5 of us. And they sat my wife and I down like this. And they had one guy that was a part-time minister. And he come out, and he said, how do you feel about the surgery next week? And I said, I feel great. God's going to take care of me. There ain't no problem. Well, he looked at my wife, and she started boo-hooing. She wasn't quite having the same faith I was.
Yeah.
So anyway, they said, well, we'd like to pray with you. So he started praying, and we were all holding hands. And I can't explain it other than what I experienced, which was it felt like in my head that heaven opened and the power of the Holy Spirit come down, and this warmth went in my head and circled my head, and then went out both my arms, and then it transferred around the room because everybody felt it.
That's awesome.
And so we knew something had happened.
Yeah.
And so when the doctor come back and said, I ain't never seen nothing like this before, I said, well, Dr. Jesus took care of me. Yeah. So, do I get some of my money back? No.
You still had to pay the bill.
But no, I didn't get any money back.
Thank goodness Jesus doesn't charge.
He doesn't charge, thank goodness. Yes.
Doctor still will.
Yeah, doctor wanted his money.
Well, it truly is an awesome thing that you experience this miracle. I'm sure that's been one of those pivotal moments in your life, right?
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
like, how's that kind of maybe help be a foundation for you going forward?
Well, I mean, if there was ever any doubt that there's a God, you would think you got to be foolish to think there's not a God.
Yeah.
And there's just so many, things that don't add up. It has to be from an outside source, from the Lord. And so, it number one, it gives me faith and hope that everything's going to be okay. That's kind of my favorite saying now. Everything's going to be all right. Don't worry about it. And when everything,
like when you face trials and tribulations now, you know that this, hey, God got me through that,
right.
And whatever He has,
right. There's nothing with God on your side. So
absolutely.
You just kind of have faith and believe, and
I'm sure that as we look at mountaintop experiences here, it was something that was a real low at first.
Oh, yes.
And then you had this mighty high.
Absolutely.
Of this real miracle taking, like for a lot of people, they haven't seen like, I think all of us have experienced miracles in our own way.
Right.
But that to me is like a major miracle, that took place in your life, that you just the whole story of the doctor and how that.
Yeah. And I don't know if I ever told you the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say. And I guess this was just my part of my life that Jesus was going to really show His presence. But I was home recovering in my bedroom, and my in-laws had come down, and I couldn't do anything. I was laid up in bed, but they were going to go out and have dinner or do whatever they. I said, "You guys go ahead. I'll just lay here and rest." Well, part of me wants to say, "Oh, this must have been a dream." But I don't think it was, because it's almost like one of those out-of-body experiences where I couldn't see Him, but I felt Him, Jesus, at the front of my bed. And audibly, I couldn't hear Him, but I knew what He was saying. And He told me to do 5 things.
Did He?
He told me to go witness to the church what had happened to me, what He had done to me, for me. He told me to witness to my father-in-law, who was there. He told me to witness to my stepfather-in-law, and that's when I don't want to do that, but I did. Okay. And he told me to do a couple other things, and I apologize, I can't remember. There was 4 or 5 things. So. And it was just as clear as I'm sitting here talking to you today. And so sure enough, my father was right there. I'm like, well, I guess I got to do this. I don't know if I did it right now. Obviously, I was recovering. But I think it was the next time he came down for a visit. Yeah. And the Lord, I guess, just told me. But my wife had a Bible that she had got from her grandmother. And so I something told me that should not have been her Bible. That should have been Mike's Bible, her dad's Bible. And he could hand it down to her. So I took that Bible and I witnessed to him and I gave him that Bible and I said, I think this is supposed to be yours. And, and told him, where to read and, how to, talk to him about getting saved.
Yeah.
And he responded positively.
Oh, good.
I hope he made that decision
Yeah.
because he passed away a few years ago. Well, then, of course, then I went to my church. I talked there and I'll never forget this lady about 80 years old. She came to me. I finished and went, Sonny, you're going to be a preacher one of these days. Like, oh, you missed that one, sweetie. But anyway, and then when I come up for the holidays, I went to my stepfather-in-law, and this guy was meaner than a rattlesnake, and so he was having health issues too, and I went in to try to witness to him, and I said, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Jesus. You get the H out of my room. I don't want to talk to you. And that was it. He was not going to let me come near.
Yeah.
And so it's so funny that, I thought of the verse, well, you witness it, you throw the seed out,
Yeah.
and sometimes you just got to pick up your sandals and head on out the door, like Jesus said, because they're not all going to respond.
And because you were honoring Christ, but doing
Right.
what He told you to do.
Right. That was hard though, because I knew he was going to be a difficult case, and he was mad anyway.
Well, you never know what you never know what those seeds plant.
Right.
And that's why we got to do it, right?
Right.
You never know.
Absolutely.
And sometimes we see those scenarios play out, and then the person that we thought would never accept Christ turns to Christ.
Absolutely.
And
hopefully he did before he passed away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So has there been other mountaintop experience? I mean, that's a big one, of course.
That's the
but
biggest
has there been
one.
any other really, experiences that you feel like God was just revealing things to you, speaking to you, or just things that you'd like to talk about and share that just motivated your heart?
Yeah, I would say the night Heidi and I had our first date, because we had known each other in high school.
Oh, really?
We'd went out on one date. Neither one of us can remember it, so it apparently did not go well.
It wasn't a memorable
It wasn't a
date.
firecracker or anything like that. No, but we were friends in high school.
Yeah.
She had some friends at Waterford. We were rival schools. We were same age, so we would see each other. And but when I first moved back in 2000, I saw her one time. She had her two little ones then. And she was married, and I just saw her. Hey, good to see you. That was it. That was the only time I ever saw her. And so I moved to West Virginia because, again, life throws you a curveball. That was another low point. I lost my job. I'd never been fired in my life.
I thought you were going to say you moved to West Virginia.
No, that wasn't. No, I was forced to move to West Virginia because I lost my job. And that was a low point, because I was single then, and you think you're doing your job, and I take pride in my work, and for them to tell you we don't need you, it's not gonna work out. That was
And
hard.
where was this at?
This was up at Easy Grout.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but that was during the Great Recession.
Yeah.
And I was a national sales manager. So who are you going to blame? You got to blame the sales guy
Yeah.
because you're not making any sales. But nobody at that time knew we were in a national. We were in a national panic. I mean, we were in the Great Recession, so nobody knew that. So, my owner was just reacting in a way that naturally he would react because he needed sales.
Yeah.
So I don't hold any grudge against that at all. That was a low point for me.
Yeah.
And then, but I went down to Huntington, and so when I was in Huntington, again the church comes into play. God comes into play. Before I left, I went to First Baptist of Williamstown.
Uh-huh.
Well, First Baptist, I don't know if they still have it, but they had a fantastic divorce recovery group over there. So if you would go in a divorce recovery group, then they also had a singles group. And so I didn't go through divorce recovery. Mine had been years earlier, but I went to the singles group.
Wow.
Well, Heidi had went through a divorce, and she went to the divorce recovery group, and she started going to this singles group. And so she was looking at the emails, and she saw Dan MCC 45786 at Yahoo. And she's like, well, that's the zip code of Waterford. And is that Dan McCutcheon? So she emailed me, said, are you Dan McCutcheon? And I said, yeah, who are you? I didn't know her last name.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, I was Heidi Newberger, blah, blah, blah. So I said, oh, okay. So I tell her that she was, what's that you call when, stalking me, yeah. But anyway, she don't like that. But anyway, so we started talking on the phone because she was living up here and I was living down there. And so after, 3 or 4 months, I was up for the holidays. I think it was the 16th of December or something like that. And I said, well, you want to go meet for dinner? So we met at Applebee's in Marietta.
Uh-huh.
And I'm telling you, when she walked in that door, I was like, took my breath away, and I'm like, I'm going to marry that girl. And turns out she felt the same thing.
Really? Wow.
Yep, the same thing. So we knew within few weeks that we were going to get married. Now, we waited a year before we got married because we didn't want people telling us we were crazy, but we knew we were going to get married. And but that was God again. That was another big high point where we we met and we found each other
awesome.
a little later in life. And so, but it's been, we'll celebrate 11 years in January. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So,
and I'm sure that, both of you having that faith to share and just like you said, that you guys were kind of a little older, you kind of appreciated probably each other more than, being younger and, and just seeing how you guys have grown. So that's really good. We didn't really get a chance, but let's talk a little bit about your childhood. You shared a little bit. I mean, I think you played sports and things like that.
I did. I was the oldest of 6 boys.
Oh, wow.
No girls. No girls. Mom and Dad kept trying for that girl and finally gave up after 6. So we grew up on a farm.
Yeah.
Mom and Dad still live on a farm.
Oh, really?
Back of Waterford, about 80
now,
acres.
Did you guys have like cattle or?
We had cattle. We had hogs. We had chickens. We had horses. We had a couple perching horses that Dad bought one time when he had been enduring in some festivities and had a couple too many drinks and brought home 2 perching workhorses. Mom was very proud. We don't need this perfectly good tractor. We're gonna use these horses.
Yeah.
That was funny. The neighborhood, they started putting up signs, about the McCutcheon horse farm and all this stuff, just teasing him like it was.
Gave him a hard time. Huh?
Oh yeah, and I was fixing fence one day, and and the horses were Jim and John, and they're like the big Clydesdales. Perching horses is about the same as a Clydesdale, and that horse, I was fixing the fence, and that horse came over and took my hat and ran off with it, and he's big. I mean, he's big horse. So I went over, and I didn't know this, but Dad and Mom was watching this through the window. And I'd go over to get my hat, and that horse would drop it. And as soon as I'd reach over, he'd grab it and run off. He did that for like 10 minutes.
He knew he was having fun.
He was having fun with me at my expense. But yeah, I had a great childhood. I mean, we worked on the farm. We learned how to work.
I was going to say that you guys probably started your day off early, right?
We did. We slopped the hogs. We baled hay. Not with these round balers, these square bales. And we threw it in the hay mow, and we pitched a lot of pig crap. We fixed fence, and it didn't take me long. No, I wasn't going to be a farmer. I'm not gonna be a farmer. Now my brothers have been very talented. They're very talented at it. I was terrible.
Yeah.
I was terrible. I shouldn't have known I was destined for sales. So I'm not going to use my back. I'm going to use my mouth.
It's kind of nice that you had that realization as a kid and as a teenager.
Yeah. When I was little one, I was the oldest, and then Doug was 2 years younger than me, and he was a natural. I mean, he could drive an 18-wheeler and park it in right in a splot. And Dad was trying to teach us how to drive tractors, and I don't know, we were maybe 3rd or 4th grade, and Doug would just drive her real smooth. Not me. I'd pop the clutch. I'd have her over in the ditch, everything. So it didn't take long to figure out Doug was tractor driver. And Dan, you get in the back and sling the hay bales. But no, we had a great childhood. We played sports, most of us, except Doug, the farmer. And but the other 5 of us all played, football, basketball, baseball, and played a lot. And we grew up in a neighborhood out in the country, and had a great childhood.
Oh,
yeah, great parents. Mom was able to stay at home, and Dad worked at a steel mill. And but now we had rough times. Dad, the steel mill got shut down. They shut down the union there back in the '80s, and I was about ready to go to college, and there was no money. It was kind of different time. So
What did your dad do after that?
well, he went back to school. He went down to
Really?
Washington State and got his chemical operator's license. He was
Wow.
probably in his 40s then, I'm guessing.
That's really good.
And then he got on at what is now SciTech down at Willow Island down there, and then they worked at the plant in Marietta and then Willow Island. Then he finished up at Solvay, up on Route 7.
Yeah.
And he still works today. He'll be 83 in January, and he works for Heist Plumbing 3 days a week.
Really?
So he has taught me
He's a
good
dedicated.
work ethic.
Yeah.
He tried to retire, didn't like it, so he went back and works, and it keeps him young.
It's kind of in his blood, I'm sure.
It is in his blood. Yeah.
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 Did he grow up on a farm too, or?
Yeah. He was in the Navy.
Oh, wow.
Scottish and Irish, one of 11
Wow.
kids.
Big
And,
family. So you guys have big reunions.
We do, yes. Yeah, a lot of food and reunion, a lot of stories. So
I know you shared, I love the one about the hat and the horse, so I have to remember that. But is there any other funny stories that you'd like to share, or anything that...
How much time you got? One that I just thought of, and tells you how smart we are. We were feeding the cattle one night in the barnyard, and Doug, my brother, was up at the top of the haymow. He was going to throw some hay down to feed the cattle. And I had this brilliant idea. I don't know how old I was, 4th grade, 3rd grade. And I said, Doug, throw that hay bale on top of me.
You said that?
Oh, yeah. Because I thought, I had this in my mind that it would just bust open and that'd be fun, like the leaves, like playing in leaves. Hay bales are heavier than leaves.
And they're kind of stuck together, right?
That hay bale hit me and I dropped like a beef. and Dad
and you invited that on yourself.
I invited it myself. And my dad comes over and picks me up, and he's carrying me to the house. And Mom said, "Is he dead?" Dad's like, "No, just knocked the wind out of him."
So how old were you then?
I'm thinking 4th grade, maybe 5th. I don't know. And Doug was probably
that probably could have killed you.
Yeah. I didn't do that again. Yeah, so we rode the pigs one time, got in trouble for that one. Dad don't like riding the pigs. And I fell off a pig.
Well, is it easy to ride a pig?
No, it's not easy. And then I fell off, and I picked up my hand, and picked it up, and there was a board on my hand because the nail had went through my hand, and the board was standing.
Oh, wow.
So Doug pulled that off to the doctor. We went to go get his tetanus shot.
Yeah.
So, but then we got in hot water because, you can kill the pigs because it was the middle of summer. We were off for school and we were riding the pigs when we, Dad was.
Found out how it happened.
Yeah. He wasn't a happy camper. No.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there was all kinds of stuff like that. But we learned how to.
I know you shared some people that influenced you before you came to Christ, but has there been other people that kind of have influenced you, kind of help you grow in your faith?
Absolutely. One that comes to mind that we just had his funeral, Bob Reeder.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a big influence on my life because he was my PE teacher when I was from 4th grade up through elementary school, and then he was my junior high football coach, and then he was my high school football coach for a year or two. And then when I went off to college and wanted to be a PE teacher, I came back and I was interviewed Bob and talked to him about being a PE teacher. So he was just a great role model. Great. I mean, he was a strong disciplinarian, but he was always fair, and he cared about you.
What was that paddle that he had?
Yeah, the one with the holes in it.
Yeah, what was that? He named it the Punisher? Or no?
Yes,
I can't remember
and he
what
used
it was.
too. Thank goodness I didn't get it.
I was going to say, were you a victim of that?
No, I was not. But there was a lot of my classmates that were. I knew to keep my mouth shut in his class. And but yeah, he was a big influence. My mom and dad, big influencers. They taught me the discipline of going to church and the discipline of working. And I'm very blessed that they're still alive and we can still spend time together. So they're a big influence because I feel very blessed because, teaching school and just living life, you see all these kids that are like, they got a terrible home life.
Yeah.
And we come home every night and we had food on the table and we didn't have a lot, but we always had Christmases together and we got to do things together, share family meals together. And
well, right there, I think that's a big part of what people miss,
it
family.
is. Yep.
being together, having a meal together, sitting down with
Yep.
your family.
Absolutely.
That's really important. I think.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we've gotten away from as a society.
Oh my
But
goodness.
it's very crucial just to have meals together. Have
It is.
time together with people
Right.
that you love.
Yeah, because I can remember sitting at the table and we, talk about your day a little bit, and that's where I learned you don't put ketchup on a steak. My dad covered that pretty thoroughly.
Did he have like a whole lecture?
Oh yeah, he's like, you don't put ketchup on a steak, son. I'm like, okay. To this day, they ask me, you want it? Nope, it's fine.
They still tease you about it or something?
No, I don't know. I just remember that sticking in my. You hear things from your parents that they stick in there.
Yeah.
You don't know why.
So I'm going to ask you this deeper question here. What would you want people to take away from your life? What do you want? What are some things that are maybe valuable to you that you'd like to pass on to others, or for others to take notice of you?
Well, I think number one would be to be a saved Christian, because we're just here for a little time.
Yeah.
It's all about the next life. We're just here passing through, and forever is a long time.
Yep.
And forever is going to be a lot longer than our 80, 90, 100 years we have here on this earth. And so I would think number one, Dan's a Christian, and now he's going to heaven because he loves his God, loves Jesus.
Yeah.
And so I think that'd be number one.
Uh-huh.
Number two, I would hope that people would learn that no matter how rough it gets, you can always laugh and smile and have fun. Because I do get complimented a lot because I like to laugh and I like to smile and I like to have a good time.
Yeah.
And I think it's this life can get rough, so you better enjoy it and try to laugh or get people to laugh around you. And then the other thing is I am very disciplined and work very, very hard. I'm it doesn't mean anything because it's just material things, but I'm proud of how hard I've worked in my career and accomplished some things that quite frankly, I never thought I could do.
Yeah.
And but
especially looking probably from when you were in the early 30s.
Oh my goodness.
To where God's brought you now.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But it's all God. It's all Jesus. What He's blessed me with. But there's an old saying: God can't steer a parked car.
Yeah.
So somebody's got to get in there and do a little work.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I wanted it. One thing we didn't get a chance to talk about yet is about you being a chaplain too, and how you got involved with that. Did you care to share? And
sure.
What school you represent and work with?
Absolutely. So about 7 or 8 years ago, my brother got hired as the head football coach at Waterford. My youngest brother, and he'd been coaching in the junior high and the pee-wees and the whole time, and they were looking for a new coach, and he applied, and the stipulation was, if he got hired, he had to hire my other brother, who was his assistant coach in junior high. Because I think they thought, he's young, we don't know if we can do the job, so bring his brother along. Well, so there's 2 McCutcheon brothers. Well, I'll never forget, he texted me that night, and he said, Dan, I got the job. I said, well, congratulations, that's great. He said, you got any advice? I said, yeah, make sure you hire assistant coaches that are smarter than you. I said, don't make you look great.
Yeah.
And so anyway, he come to me a few weeks later, and he said, Dan, I want to do a team prayer before the game and after the game, and I want you to do it if you'll do it.
Cool.
And I said, well, I'd be honored. So, and of course, I was traveling a lot with my job, and I worked it out because it's just Friday nights. I said I can't be there, but other than Friday nights. And
yeah.
So yeah, that's how it happened, and we just started it with. First, we kind of started just say a prayer, and but now it's kind of turned into. I get a Bible verse, and I let kind of God guide me that day of what Bible verse, depending on the situation, who we're playing, what kind of story we need. Sometimes we need David and Goliath, sometimes we don't, And so then it's kind of expanded from there, and then like I was telling you earlier, now the team is praying on their own.
Yeah.
So it means a lot because they learn a lot about football, but I think they learn a lot about life on our team because Because football will end one day, but life goes on, and
absolutely,
you have to be ready to deal with it. And
I'm sure that meant a lot to you that your brother,
my goodness,
thought that of you. That
it did.
He wanted you to do that.
It did. Meant a lot to me. So, But anyway, we
Just don't touch him on the sideline.
no, don't pull him back. I'm the get back coach, so don't pull him back. He gets all bent out of shape, especially if we're losing.
He's probably more pleasant when when they're winning. He's okay.
Yeah,
with it.
yeah. Fortunately, we win a lot more than we lose because he's no fun when we're losing.
I don't know very many coaches are. You know, if they're a good coach, they're probably not happy.
They're not happy.
So just talk a little bit about Porterfield and how you guys started coming and
Absolutely.
and maybe some of your involvement here at Porterfield.
Yes, we obviously Heidi and I was in West Virginia, and then when we first got married, she moved down to Kenna with me. We kind of split it. I come up from the Huntington Charleston area and moved to Kenna on 77.
Uh-huh.
And so I could drive to Charleston. This is before I was working on the federal team. I was working locally in West Virginia. And then she would drive all the way up to Beverly. So that was a pretty good haul, about an hour and 10 minutes each way.
Oh,
and
wow.
so we did that for about a year. And I got the job as a federal rep. And so I could live pretty well anywhere as long as I was fairly close to my territory. So we were at the beach. It seems like we make these big decisions at the beach. I think it's because you look at the ocean, it's all peaceful. You know, it's God.
Uh-huh.
And anyway, I said, we had a couple rental houses. I had bought some houses while I was working for Easy Grout, so I had some rental houses up here. And so one of the rental houses was going to become empty. And I said, well, why don't we move back? And so I didn't have to talk very long to convince her to have a 15-minute drive instead of, an hour and 15.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's do that. So we moved back up, and so then we had to find a church. So it was, so that's where we ended up. We visited. I don't know if we visited any churches. I think Porterfield Baptist was the first one we went to.
And you stayed.
And we're like, this is us here.
Good.
And I remember seeing Mark preach, and we liked him, and we met him, and we liked everybody around with staff. I mean, it took a little while to, to kind of get to know everybody because we didn't know anybody here.
Yeah.
Because we're from Waterford, Beverly, so we knew people down that way. But we knew the Youngs, so that helped.
Yeah, because they own that territory down there.
Yep. And we knew Sue and Troy Chrisman.
Yeah.
So,
because of Williamstown, or
because of the Williamstown Church. We
yes.
Went to,
okay.
Yep. And I don't know if we knew anybody else. Heidi knew a couple people maybe. But that was it. Wow. And everybody else we've met since we came here. But, it didn't take long, and we were just felt like, well, this is home. And then you got to get involved. I mean, if you don't get involved with the church, you're just going to fade away. You got to put some effort into it and do some things for the church and not just take. You got to give a little bit, and then you feel part of something.
In if I remember correctly, parking lot, was that your first entry in the service here? Or was there some before?
Yeah, I think that was.
I think that's where I remember seeing you serve.
I think that was my first thing.
And you met Earl.
I met Earl, and I still park cars. No, Earl, he knows what he's doing. He's got a mission, and he sticks to her.
Yeah.
And then that's Earl. And
we all have to give Earl a little hard time.
He's used to it. He gets a hard time. But yeah, and I've still been parking. I don't know how many years we've been doing that. I'm still parking.
Quite a few, I think.
Yeah, like one Sunday a month.
Yeah.
And I always make jokes to my guys that we park together. I always send a text message and put a little humor into it. Well, it's lucky us. It's our turn. We get to go out in the rain tomorrow.
Great forecast.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So it's 12 degrees. All right.
Well, we don't often get to thank people for doing that. So I want to tell you thanks for serving out there because, like we talk about, that you guys are like the first, people that the church, if somebody's coming new to the church, you're our first line of first impressions.
Right.
And so, just helping people get a parking spot that coming in late, some people do. And
yeah, they end up across the street if they're too late. Because we have been full lately.
Yeah.
I mean, full.
Yeah. And so I know that transition to you getting even more involved. So what you're currently, I'll let you say it, but what are you?
Well, I'm on the deacon.
Yes.
You asked me to be a deacon, or you or Mark, one of them. I can't remember.
We approached you about it, right?
Yep. And so I've been a deacon now for 2 years, and I've enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed I don't get to be here all the time for all the meetings because of my work. I'm covering 11 states, so I'm out of town so much.
Yeah.
But so parking, I can always be here because I don't have to go out on town on the weekends. Very rare. So, got to be one of the deacons, and then I've got to teach Sunday school class, which of course that brings back my teaching days,
Yeah,
and I really did enjoy that.
Yeah.
I enjoyed teaching, so I'll do that again.
Absolutely.
And then I think that's it. Heidi's been in the she's helped with the nursery, and then she did Stephen's ministry.
Oh yes.
And
that's great.
So we're hoping once she gets to retire here fairly soon, I hope, then she'll be able to get a little more involved in things too as well. So.
Well, I just want to tell you, Dan, I appreciate your heart and just you can just tell you love God, you love Jesus, and you love people. I mean, it just comes out of you that you really do just have a genuine love, and you can just see that enthusiasm that you have for life, and I'm sure that's part of the miracle that took place too, that you just have that extra enthusiasm because you recognize what God did there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could have been in heaven these last 35 years or whatever it was, 30, whatever it is, I can't. But he said, nope, not time. You got more work to do down here. So.
Well, just before we end this, I do want to ask one question, since you have that expertise in sales. A lot of times we think about sharing our faith. What would you say to people, just kind of encourage them as maybe they feel backwards a little bit and like they're maybe embarrassed or feel like what do I say or how do I talk about my faith?
Well, I think you just got to have a conversation with people. It's just find out, you got to kind of use the experience, use the situation you're dealt. So, maybe if somebody's having a rough lot, a rough day or a rough go of it, maybe you talk about, have you ever thought about having Jesus on your side?
Yeah.
That's a guaranteed life insurance there.
I like what you said there, that you look for opportunities when
Right.
somebody's heart is at that place where they need to hear that.
Right.
That you look for those opportunities.
Yeah. And when I do a lot when I share my faith a lot when I'm riding with guys at work. And so far I've not gotten any grief about it. If they wanted to go to HR, I guess they could, but I just share, hey, and I've got friends that are Jewish friends, so they'll kind of share what their faith beliefs are, and I had a friend that was a Mormon, and we would kind of share, so you kind of share and talk, and you kind of just throw it out there. I'm very non-threatening. That's the way I am in sales, and that's kind of the way I am approaching people.
Yeah.
I was in Nashville not too long ago, and I talked to this young couple. And they were leaving. He's an FBI agent, and they were moving. They were traveling from Boston to Vegas.
Oh wow!
And I don't normally do this, but I said, you know what? When you guys get out to Vegas, go find yourself a good church. I said, because you're going to need one, and make sure you get to know the Lord, because you guys are young now. You're just getting started, but you're going to need the Lord, and so. And they kind of, okay. So
yeah,
I don't know whether they did or not, but I tried to plant the seed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You planted a seed in somebody's life. And
right.
You trust God with the rest, right?
Right. And plus, if you're going to Vegas, you really need God.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, Dan. And I'm we hope that this will help people get to know you and other people that go through this, that, we all have a story and we all have a testimony. So thank you for sharing yours today.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.